Hello and welcome to the Third Perspective, where we wield the first before the worst. I'm your host, Rob, and tonight I have with me Byron,
The liberal libertarian.
and I also have Kat.
The independent.
So this is our group for tonight as we discuss gun control. But I have to start off on this note. We have to talk about Christopher Dorner and the LAPD's crusade to find Christopher Dorner, and how many lives are going to be wrecked in this fiasco. We start this off. He's an ex-Los Angeles Police Department cop. He is a former lieutenant in the United States Navy. Joined the Los Angeles Police Department because he felt it was his calling. It's what he wanted to do with his life. And he held himself to a high standard of what it meant to be for an officer. Now, mainstream media will continue to paint him in a bad light, but we've done the research on our own, and I hope that you will too, whether it's articles from the Los Angeles Times, his actual manifesto. We've done the research, and I hope that you will too, because what the mainstream media is trying to paint is a picture of a man who is just pure evil. Now, I'm not saying that he isn't evil. God knows anybody that attacks or targets innocent civilian family members is pretty much evil. But what this man has to say is important, and I believe everybody needs to hear it, especially with gun control on the table, because people want us to rely wholeheartedly on our police departments. And the problem comes in that this guy worked for the police department, and he basically tried to stop the corruption within his department. Whether it's the lady who had the nickname Chupacabra because she liked to draw blood from the people detained by her. We're talking about people handcuffed and are of no threat to the police there. He talks about an actual charges that he brought against this lady where they had gone to an elderly lady's house. This lady was 71 years old, and she was being charged with assault because she sprayed down her tenants who were late on their rent payments. I'm sure we've all wanted to spray people down who've been late on whatever they owe us. Whether that's right or wrong, beside the point. But this woman, this lady deemed Chupacabra by the police department, took this elderly lady who had fragile skin. You know, we all know about you get older, your skin gets looser, but hers was particularly worse. And this woman thought it was funny to go up to the elderly woman and give her a friction burn, an Indian burn, where you twist the skin. And this actually caused this elderly woman's skin to break. And this is an actual thing that they discussed. And charges were brought against but later dropped. And in this trial that he had to go to where he brought these charges against her, the people on the panel, he protested because they were close personal friends. I don't know about you, but that's a problem. Ultimately, she was exonerated, and he was forced aside and later had his career entirely destroyed. This has had me fuming for days, but not just because of this, but because of the LAPD's reaction. That there's two different instances where they shot up innocent civilians driving somewhere. They made no provocative action, but these cops gave no warning and just shot up their vehicles. So I'm a little upset at this and this mentality that the Los Angeles Police Department has where they're just going to sweep this under the rug. And I've dominated enough time, I can get a little sidebar from my cohorts. Byron, what do you think about all this? I mean, granted, he is a nut job. He's going around killing people. He's probably killed at least one cop. He's injured two because he shot up a police car.
Allegedly.
allegedly. It's all alleged. You're innocent in America until proven guilty. And I like to emphasize that because despite what anybody says, you are innocent until proven guilty. Just because the police think you're guilty doesn't give them the right to go around doing what they're doing, like shooting up these vehicles with innocent people in them. But, and then he's alleged to have shot and killed a police captain's daughter and fiancé. So, what do you have to say about this? I'm fuming.
I have no trust in the police department.
Well, isn't it ironic that they want us to put our full faith and confidence in our police forces, yet this is what we can expect from our police forces?
Which means our police forces operate on a purely emotional basis. They don't identify people, they don't identify vehicles. The two vehicles that they shot at are completely different than what he's actually driving.
Here's a really good point. We want to discuss this. The blue Toyota Tacoma driven by two paper ladies, a mother and daughter delivering papers to this neighborhood. From what I've read and from what I've heard on news reports, apparently this vehicle pulled out of a driveway without any headlights, taillights. They just left their lights off. And the LAPD, without registering what this vehicle was, without checking to see who was inside, without doing anything, just opened fire on this vehicle. Now, this vehicle was a blue Toyota Tacoma, which if you know anything about cars, there's a big difference between a Toyota Tacoma and the Nissan Titan in question.
Yes.
I mean, you're a big car guy. You do this all the time. You look at cars and you love looking at cars. I mean, what similarities are there really between a Toyota Tacoma and a Nissan Titan?
They have engines, bodyworks, and a bed to put things in.
It's a truck.
But no.
It's a vehicle. It looks like the vehicle that we're looking for. Shoot it. Like, we don't even take the time to think about it?
But no, in all honesty, Dorner's pickup has a roof rack. It has oversized tires. It looks distinctly different from the other two vehicles that were shot up by the police, because one is a black Honda RTS Ridgeline, which sits lower to the ground.
And that's another one. Not moments after the first vehicle was shot up, the Torrance Police Department received calls from people within that neighborhood stating that they heard gunshots. So they dispatch police to that neighborhood, and they see this black Honda Ridgeline, also looking nothing like a Nissan Titan, and proceeded to shoot this vehicle up. I mean, what's up with that?
On a side note, the media is making this even worse. I mean, the note they put out on TV said that it was either a gray or blue vehicle and listed not one but two license plate numbers, so not even they know what they're looking for.
How is it that the police, who have access to the Department of Motor Vehicle records, don't know which vehicle he's driving? A blue or gray Nissan Titan giving two different license plate numbers. This stinks of treachery. Like, what's going on here?
He's an LAPD officer. You would expect the people that he works with to know what he drives.
I mean, I'm not a big expert on police and activities, but when I was in the military, we used to do stupid stuff, and granted, it's really not that stupid to do vehicle inspections and make sure that before a long weekend that your vehicle is good to go. I just thought it was stupid. And yeah, I was a young, dumb private, and that's what I thought. But I would assume that in the police department, another big government agency, that they're going to want to do stuff like that. They're going to want to make sure that their officers are driving safe vehicles. But I may be crazy. And also, how do people not know? This guy, I guarantee you, this guy had friends within the police force. Unless it is really as racist and screwed up as he implies, then I guess he wouldn't have any friends.
So it's so racist that you confuse two Asian women for one big black guy?
Well, that's pretty insane. We're talking about two Asian women, an elderly lady and a younger, her daughter, who were delivering papers to this neighborhood, who just were going about their business and didn't give any warning. They were just shot up because they, as the police put it, the vehicle looked like the vehicle that they were looking for.
The worst part is it wasn't just the car that was shot up, but there was damage done to parked vehicles and the surrounding houses.
Oh, this is wonderful to me. Listening to some of these people that lived in the neighborhood, they'd never heard gunshots in their neighborhood before, and now they're digging bullets out of their houses. There's bullet holes in their cars. Like, we're talking about vehicles off the street. One lady talked about the fact that she didn't know that her vehicles had been hit by bullets until she saw it on television, liquid draining out from her vehicle. How insane is that? How would you like to go to look, have outside your house a shootout, and the cops are so inaccurate that they're hitting the house over here? Like, here's the car, not 20 feet away is where the cops appear to have lit them up from, and there's a cone-shaped pattern out to these houses and vehicles that they've shot up. Are they really that inaccurate?
And this is who's supposed to be protecting me.
On top of
Do you feel safe?
Totally.
Because if I was in LA, I would not feel safe.
And that's the thing. I wouldn't feel safe not because of Christopher Dorner, but because of the police.
Exactly. I would be more worried about going outside my door, not because of a rogue cop, but because these police can't contain themselves. They can't take a moment to think about something before they do it.
What's scary, it's not just one person that did this, but it's an entire group of people shooting at unidentified persons on the street.
Well, you've got two different police departments that without warning opened up on two different cars. Not moments after the first, you have the Torrance Police Department opening up on the Honda Ridgeline. I mean, what does it take to identify a criminal and say you're the person we're looking for? I understand that you might be scared that, oh my God, this guy is targeting cops. But when you go out of your way and say, oh my God, this might be the guy, and you shoot them up, and it's not the person you're looking for, what penalty should be there? This should not be, oh, it's a case of mistaken identity. We're putting them on administrative paid leave until we can figure out what actually happened.
They should be let go. I mean, they caused other people, other innocent people, harm.
But mark my words, they're just going to get moved elsewhere until it blows over. They're not going to be fired. They're going to justify this. They were still trying. The police chief was justifying their actions. News is trying to justify what happened. Oh, it's just a case of mistaken identity. How do you mistake them?
And you're going to tell this to the people that were injured? Oh, it was my bad. I thought you were somebody else.
On top of that, they could have done a felony stop, too. I mean, they could have came out of their cars, shined their light on the main vehicle with their weapons drawn and just went in and detained the people until they identified them. They didn't even do that. They just opened fire.
I mean, they have procedures for these sort of things.
So we're so afraid that we're just going to forget everything that we've been taught, and we're going to put innocent lives in danger. I don't think, and this is where I'm going to go off on a tangent, I don't think they're looking to bring in Christopher Dorner. It sounds more like to me they're trying to cover up their department's misconduct. So they're coming in guns blazing because they don't want to bring this guy in. They don't want to actually have this guy stand up in a court of law and testify why he did the things he did. Because that will take all their dirty laundry and air it for the American people to see. Not just LA, but the American people.
Well, that's not to say that what Mr. Dorner is doing is the correct course of action. I mean, you don't fight one wrong by doing more wrong things, but what he's trying to point out, at least, is a valid point. Not to be redundant.
Well, yeah. I mean, and you're right. You shouldn't fight a wrong with a wrong. But even the police department is fighting a wrong with a wrong. You're worried about this guy is going to kill other cops and maybe their other families. So what do? You open up on an innocent family.
Two.
A mother and daughter. You just open up on them. It doesn't make any sense to me. And there's so much irony in this idea that they just need to unload, shoot first, ask questions later.
Here's the funny thing.
Welcome to the Wild Wild West.
Yeah,
I want to have a gun now. I don't want the cops to be the only person defending me.
Even better, aren't you glad the cops don't have automatic weapons?
Oh dear.
Oh, give it time. We are militarizing our police forces.
Well, let's put it
What
this
a
way.
terrifying thought.
Has anybody reported actually on how many rounds were fired?
No, they're investigating it, which is insane to me because, as with every governmental agency, every round is tracked. So however many rounds they expelled should be known right away. They should know because everything is tracked for this very reason. But they refuse to comment on it.
Because
the bullet holes, as I was listening to an interview with the two ladies' lawyer from Reason TV, the lawyer counted 30 bullet holes before he stopped counting.
That's just
30 bullet holes just in the vehicle.
That's not counting everywhere else.
How do you need 30 rounds to shoot at someone who doesn't shoot back?
Well, let's see. Well, no.
Where's your oh my god, they're not shooting back. This might not be the right person.
30 rounds for 2 people.
Yeah.
You
Think
can't
about
aim?
this. Think about this, because on top of the fact
that was a given by the fact that they're hitting houses and cars off the street.
No, but think about this.
And we're not talking way down the street. We're talking about here's the vehicle in the middle of the road. Out next to it, on either side, is hit by bullets. And I'm sorry for cutting you off.
I was gonna say, okay, so you have the 2 cops who, 2 cops per car?
Yeah.
Most likely. So you have 2 of them who will fire on sight, which means each pistol they're carrying has 17 rounds in the clip.
And I still haven't seen anywhere. Did you see anything in your research how many cops were at each location?
Haven't found it. I was spending time on the manifesto more than anything else.
I don't think they've discussed this. And if it was just the 2 cops patrolling the neighborhood, how many rounds are in a 9mm?
Let's say they're using the Glock, so I'm gonna say 16 to 17. So that's 32 to 34 rounds just for 1 clip each person.
So under that, if that's what they're using, then they unloaded an entire magazine apiece.
And possibly reloaded.
Like, when does it, like, an alarm bell go off? When do you go?
Most cops usually, like,
they're not doing anything.
In an emergency situation, most cops, that period to reload is usually where they stop and think whether that person is returning fire or not. If they're not, they usually kind of hang back. If they are, they usually keep going.
So I'm praying that maybe this was a case of mistaken identity. They're scared. They jumped the gun and did it too fast. But if they reloaded, this is by far worse.
What are they scared of? I mean, unless they're guilty of something, they have no reason to be scared.
That's a brilliant point. Like, is the entire LAPD guilty of something? Because I guarantee you, the cops in question weren't out patrolling this neighborhood. It was other cops. And then the Torrance PD comes in guns blazing. What does that tell you? We're talking about possibly a huge cover-up in our police departments.
I guess this could segue into a conspiracy theory in a way.
Well, I mean, why else would they open up guns blazing? And I don't like to go off on conspiracy theories. I don't like this because it actually hurts the liberty movement, and we'll talk about that in a later cast. But why is it that you would come out guns blazing? I get that you're scared, but how do you get it in your mind that I'm just going to go shoot up this car because it resembles the one I'm looking for?
To be fair, in Mr. Dorner's manifesto, he did state that he was going to go after the people who had slighted him and their families. But unless you're directly related to any of those people, you have no reason to stand up for yourself, I suppose.
But here's the thing. Under that circumstance, how are you supposed to know which cops are in which car?
Well, I guess that's a good question. And I haven't seen anything as to the effect of the wounded cops and the dead cop to know whether or not they were on his manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do have the unadulterated, unedited version with all the names, thanks to Free Talk Live, our buddies spreading the libertarian word up in the Northeast. But I posted that on the Facebook page. I mean, you can check this out. The guy rambles. I mean, he's clearly lost it. I mean, Kat sat here and read the whole thing. So, I mean, that's quite a read. I mean, what is there, 22 pages there? 21, you're missing the back page.
I didn't bother counting. It was certainly something.
But on top of that being released, what I really want to see, I want the radio logs between the officers and dispatch to be released to the public. Because I want to see, did they even call it in before they opened fire, and what were they doing between the times, like how did that all go down?
Police procedure. The first thing you do is you call in. No matter what the situation is, if you're in a tense situation, I got it. If they open fire on you, you respond. That's the way it works. But when you're dealing with a vehicle like this, isn't your first thing to do to call it in?
Well, isn't calling in exactly to prevent something like this from happening, where you don't act on instinct and shoot up something just because it looks like it should be what you're looking for?
Well, you got the entire the police chief is trying to say that this isn't normal operating procedure. Okay, that makes sense. I'm sure there's something on the books that says you call in, but it doesn't seem like this is happening. I mean, it was done by the LAPD, and then it was done by the Torrance PD.
2 instances, not just one isolated incident.
Yeah, so you're looking at a greater issue here.
The guy's not just going off killing random people. I mean, he does seem to still want to protect the people to some degree.
Well, see, I wouldn't be worried about Chris Dorner, like you said.
He actually stated that he's only going to go after certain people. I mean, he asked the FBI and other agencies not to get involved.
So he's not an open threat.
Well, obviously
to the
they didn't listen, because I've seen on the news that on CNN and Fox talking about the involvement of
the FBI. Did they actually read his manifesto?
Oh, I'm sure they did. Just nobody's talking about it. Because they're trying to paint him, and the mainstream media, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, are all trying to paint him into this corner. They're trying to make him sound like a madman, and I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm simply saying that they aren't giving him his fair due, like why he's doing this. Nobody wants to talk about this. Huffington Post, who they're a little nutty and they like some liberal things, but they actually had this on their site, edited to keep out the names of police, but they talked about it. I just don't understand why mainstream media can't talk about it. Like, they all have a vested interest somehow in how these stories play out.
Right.
Because my other issue is if they call it in, then even if you were dealing with, say, hostiles in a foreign territory or something, if you have backup available to you, you'd call it in, you'd track the target. If they're really that hostile of a target, you hang back, and you just track them. You can get a bird in the air or something, and then you can get the rest of your units to kind of quarantine the area, and then you grab your target.
We were watching Fox News before this, and it's because I've been flipping back and forth between CNN, Fox, and MSNBC all day because I wanted to prepare for this. And Fox News was interviewing someone. I don't know who it was. He was off screen the entire time, but basically he went on television to make people scared. This guy was talking about, see, look at this guy. When he shoots a gun, he doesn't move with recoil. And I'm stunned at the direction they're taking with this to scare people. I don't know if this plays into the searches they're doing in Big Bear, California, which, mind you, is a long ways. He took a 2-hour drive and left LA and went to Big Bear. And up in Big Bear, he apparently torched his truck. And you can read about this from the LA Times or watch Fox and MSNBC or any of them and actually see this torched vehicle, which, yes, it resembles a Nissan Titan, but we're no closer to understanding whether or not he owned a blue or a gray Nissan Titan or what his license plate number was. But the police matched the VIN number and it's his vehicle. But we don't know what license plate it was.
Or color.
Or the color. I mean,
it was a Nissan. The only reason...
This stuff we've tracked. We want the Department of Motor Vehicles of whatever state you're in to track all this information on your vehicle. I'm actually confused as to why we need all this information tracked, but they track it. So how do we not know what he's driving?
I was gonna say, well, initially the thought made sense, but now it doesn't. Like, he could have swapped his plates, which could be why they have two plates, but at the same time, that wouldn't really help, because if it's a suspicious vehicle, I think you'd radio it in anyway. If the plates don't
So why
match
not
the vehicle,
swap vehicles entirely?
Yeah.
Which he may have done. This may have been something to get the police off his tail. But let's talk about this issue. They went into these neighborhoods in Big Bear, which we're talking about thousands of homes, and they went door to door and searched all these homes.
with a warrant or not?
That's what I don't get. There's no information on this. There's no whether it was, can we check your house? There's no information on what's going on here. Like, it sounds to me like they went in and said, we need to check your house, and forced their way into these people's houses. But that's probably just me being overly suspicious. But if I was in these neighborhoods and they came up to my house and said, I want to check your house, I would tell them no, because you need a warrant.
This sounds a bit suspicious. I mean, they're obviously playing this off so that people start panicking. I mean, it's bad enough they have the police panicking and shooting, but why would you want to inspire fear?
Well, that's
in
the
the
thing.
normal
That's what
populace?
what I'm talking about here. We want people to stay in their houses and stay afraid, because if this guy's a danger to everyone else, then you're going to stay out of the way. You're not going to get in the way of their investigation.
Well, see, there's multiple angles there. There's that. If you have everyone staying in their houses, that minimizes the amount of traffic that's going on in town, which means you can pick off people more easily. So you're only looking for, there's only going to be a few lifted Nissan Titans with oversized tires on them that's going to be moving around at the same time. On top of that, if you get everyone...
Which they did find, and this is why they're doing it. They found his burnt-out vehicle, and this was near Big Bear, and they tracked him, I guess, to Big Bear, California, and that's why they're searching all the homes in Big Bear, California.
So basically, they've lost him.
Well, the what I've been getting from the news is that he went to this town, from what they're telling us, and they're not finding him in the town, so they're scouring the forest nearby. They've got SWAT, they've got regular cops, they've got all these people pouring over the forest after whatever they may have done in the city of Big Bear, California. But they're out there searching for this guy, and their hope was that there was no fresh snow last night. So that last night being the 8th, or the 7th to the 8th night, tonight, or the 8th. Yeah,
February 7th to February 8th.
That's what we're talking about. They found his vehicle burnt out on Thursday, February 7th. And then they supposedly tracked him to this town. They spent the 8th searching all these towns. Today there was no fresh snow, so they're hoping that wherever he went in the forest, his tracks aren't obscured, but they still have had no luck.
Well, if he hasn't been found by now, what makes them think that the lack of fresh snow will help them? I mean, he's obviously good at obscuring his trail.
Yeah,
if
he's as well military trained as they make him out to be.
I'm sorry, a lieutenant really, that's a captain in the Army, which 03 he made it that far up in the ranks, but that's not that high as an officer.
Well,
you really don't I would have to see what his military background is to know what his training is. The fact that he's an expert marksman just tells me he could have had training from the military, because everybody fires a weapon, and he has training in the police force.
Which showed on the recoil thing, he's just a big guy. He's strong,
yeah.
So
He tends to toot his own horn a bit in the manifesto, but I haven't done any further research on his ranking to know if what he says is something I can trust.
Well, and what's weird is they've they apparently hacked into his Facebook, and they're using everything on his Facebook as evidence. I don't know what they found. They went to his mother's home in Las Vegas, and they apparently took stuff out of there. Nothing said, of course, of what that is, because that might harm the investigation. But
And going back to the thing about keeping, fear mongering the people. The more you fear monger the people, the more reactive they are, and they'll start reporting just about any dark pickup that matches the description, or every person that matches the description they can find.
Yeah, well, with this hair trigger police force, I'm not so sure that's a good thing.
yeah,
He's black. He's big. Arrest him.
Arrest him. Shoot him.
yeah, there will be no arrest, and this is what I really gather from this. I don't think they're trying to bring him in. I think they're trying, and
to silence
this
him.
is the conspiracy theory angle. And yes, I know I'm speculating, but it really seems like they're trying to silence him. They don't want this discussed on a national scale.
Well, the worst part is the whole reason why he's lashing out is because he's tired of the truth being hidden. I mean, everyone else took Miss Evans's side in the trial. Miss Evans is the name of the lady who...
The Chupacabra.
The Chupacabra lady, yes. Everyone else took her side. Everyone else is all for hiding all the shit that's going on in the LAPD, apparently. And he apparently got so fed up with it that he's going after the guilty party and their family, which isn't okay. I mean, you shouldn't have to resort to killing people to get your point across, but apparently that's what this guy's doing.
Oh, here's an interesting thing, and the media isn't talking about this either. Christopher Dorner is a big government guy. He wants big government. That's his thing. I mean, he's a big Obama supporter. He's a big believer in the idea that we need the federal government to come in and help us all. We need gun control.
Interestingly enough.
It's a little ironic because he believes he deserves to have a gun, but not the rest of us.
Well, in his manifesto, he illustrates how easy it was for him to acquire all sorts of weaponry. Like
But he's a cop. I mean,
And
I
he's
don't think it's
ex-military.
that. I don't think it's that far of a stretch for him to get something like that.
No, not necessarily. But let me see if I can dig it up.
All right. We'll kind of keep talking, and when you find it, yeah, I don't think that that's far of a stretch for him, and the idea that he's pushing for gun control like I said, there's so much irony in this. I mean, this guy is an ex-cop running around allegedly killing other cops, and the cops are coming out guns blazing. We need to rely on them to protect us, which is why he's holding them to a higher standard that they apparently can't maintain. But gun control advocates and this guy want us to rely on these corrupt forces, not saying they're all corrupt, but rely on them to say, like when something happens, dial 911, get the cop there. I mean, but when seconds count, the police are minutes away. That's the big issue here. And when cops do this, like opening up on innocent civilians, do you really feel safer relying only on the police? I think we've already established that you guys don't feel safer, but that's what I'm trying to get across to whoever listens to this. I mean, do you really feel safe?
No, but it's interesting that this guy who is causing the police to have this sort of reaction is for gun control. And yet the police's actions don't inspire that sort of feeling in me. I mean, honestly.
And yet, to continue this, like the mainstream media, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, I'm sure I could get sued for saying all this, but like they're trying to paint him into the corner and pretend that he's not this gun control advocate. He's not big government, but he is a reason why we need gun control. And it just doesn't work.
Well, they're trying to paint him like he's a horrible person, when in fact he's doing all this because he's been stifled so much over the course of his career.
I mean, how long are you going to be around something horrible before it starts to rub off on you? Not saying that he didn't have these terrible tendencies before, but if you're not getting something done, and Free Talk Live didn't like the question, the way this went when somebody asked it, but where's the line in the sand? Where do you do something? And this is where I differ from most of my libertarian brethren. Like, at what point do you have to say enough is enough? When does violent reaction become necessary? Libertarians don't believe in violence. They believe in a totally nonviolent approach. And I think there will come a time, even in this country, where we have to fight back against the federal government, which is why we have guns. And to take them away, to place full faith and confidence in police forces that do things like this, really defeats the purpose.
Right. And that's why, well...
Which is, Kat just showed me this little section here in his manifesto. And
which is ironic because it sounds like a communist manifesto, which, if you take some time to read, which 90% of people never will, is probably one of the most horribly written documents in the history of the world. It just doesn't back anything up it says. It's ridiculous.
It seems really hypocritical here because basically he's using his status to acquire class 3 weapons like suppressors, that kind of thing. And then he's saying that, no one should be able to acquire them, that these are loopholes. Basically, he's saying that cops and ex-military personnel aren't competent enough to have their own, class 3 weapons like a suppressor or an AR-15.
Well, the federal government is trying to say, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but the federal government is trying to say that I, as a veteran of the military, should be looked at to not be allowed to have firearms. The Department of Homeland Security has published memos saying that veterans need to be watched and that we probably shouldn't be allowed to own firearms.
Because you know how to use them?
Are they afraid you're going to have an episode of PTSD or something and shoot a bunch of people?
Maybe.
I mean, there's a lot of military personnel that never see combat. All they have to do is deal with their pain in the ass buddies.
Yeah, that's kind of my case. I've been to Kuwait. I've been like a little bit down the street and really didn't do anything. I didn't see combat, but it doesn't make exceptions. It just, they want to limit us from owning guns, and I think that's wrong.
As for that little bit in the manifesto, he was also kind of pointing out that nobody did a background check on him at all when he...
That's what I mean. He was using his status to acquire weapons.
Which is a little ironic. If you want cops and military to be the only one who own guns, which is what many gun control advocates want, how is that a solution? Like, he's using his status, like you said, to get these guns, but at the same time, he's saying that the average person shouldn't be allowed to. But he's using his status, which he thinks those are the people who should have guns.
So he's manipulating the system, but at the same time chastising the system for not doing their job?
Well, he's kind of round robin arguing. He's trying to say one thing when he actually means another.
He's proving something completely different. Because military ID, you only have it when you're actually in the military. Mm-hmm. You're either active or reserve.
Well, it depends.
Right?
If you retire, which if he got out as a lieutenant, I don't think there's any way he retired from the military. But if you retire, you get an ID for retirement. If he's a reservist, which I think it actually said that he was, he's a reservist somewhere, or at least up until recently, he was in the Navy Reserves. So if he was still in, then yes, he would still have a military ID.
But then that completely contrasts what he's saying, because basically he's saying the average Joe shouldn't be allowed to get these weapons. The average Joe doesn't have a military ID, so he wouldn't be able to get those weapons anyway.
So, like you said, he's using his status, but saying that people shouldn't be allowed to get it, except for people with his status.
Yeah. Now, the AR-15 is something different altogether, but that's still, your standard weapon. I can understand the suppressor thing, because that has more of a combat use, although it does have a hunting use. Yeah.
He's still using his status to get it, so his argument
is
invalid because of exactly what he's saying. So, I mean, there is a point where you can question this. I mean, he's not helping his discussion. And the fact that people are jumping behind this and trying to use it as reason for gun control is even more insane.
I find it very hypocritical that he's threatening people and threatening people's families and people, and but yet advocating gun control. I mean, you're either for one or the other. You can't be the exception to the rule. You can't say, oh, well, I think guns are bad, and then threaten people in a very straightforward and clear manner in your manifesto.
I mean, that's the irony of the thing. It's like, I mean, you're doing wrong. You're doing terrible, despicable things, so I'm going to do terrible, despicable things to you.
Right.
So I understand that there comes a time when you got to draw the line in the sand, but it doesn't seem like he's doing that. He's going to the next level. I mean, and it is getting the word out, so hopefully people will listen to stuff like this and actually know what's going on versus, watching mainstream media and just being fed, sorry to say, what the White House wants you to hear.
Or whoever pays the media.
I mean, it's sad when conservatives are more or less the biggest proponents of actually having guns, and our conservative news that we have, Fox, is using this and actually is pushing for gun control. Like, who's left in the mainstream media to back the idea that we need guns?
No.
That we don't have guns, and this is where we ultimately we're going with this episode, is that why do we have guns? We have guns to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. So when government takes away that right, what recourse do we have to defend ourselves when the government decides above all else that it is right and that you have no say?
Well, we have knives for all the good that's going to do us.
Well, that's what's funny. Newtown, Connecticut, and I'll let you say what you were going to say. When Newtown, Connecticut happened, and he went in and he shot up this elementary school, that same day, in China, who has extreme gun control, a dude went in and stabbed a bunch of kids at this school. So the idea that without guns we won't have violent crime is false. It isn't true by any stretch of the imagination.
People will find a way, and without guns, unfortunately, the masses will be on a lower playing field. I mean, the government is large and getting unregulated as it is.
Growing without regulation, it's just growing out of control.
Right, and the worst part is, we may as well just leave guns alone with the way people aren't questioning anything in today's day and age, which is kind of getting off track, but...
See, here's my issue. I don't think the Second Amendment should be infringed on. I think everyone has the right to their own firearm. And at the smaller level, at the individual level, the FBI raids your house with no warrant or something like that, I think you have the right to defend yourself.
Well, see, there's a greater issue of the growing out of control of government. I mean, the Patriot Act gives the FBI the ability to write their own warrant, bust down your door, show you the warrant, and say there's nothing you can do about it, and don't talk about it.
Well, where are your rights in this case?
You don't have any.
You don't. Under the Patriot Act, you have no rights.
But see, here's the other problem I see. Because on the individual level, it works to some degree. I mean, there's the Patriot Act, which causes problems, and the NDAA.
The National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, which had the line that said that essentially Americans could be detained indefinitely. So you could essentially take these two bills together and they could throw you away and forget about you, and they don't have to say or do anything.
So basically, they don't have to be responsible for their own actions. They can do whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want to, and you can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
Now, but here's my other problem. When you look at the bigger picture of, say, the people versus the government, even with the Second Amendment, we're sorely screwed.
Yes and no. And this is what's interesting. If there becomes an uprising and the people start to fight back, the first place of the Civil War
Starts in the military.
will start in the military. And it will be because people like me refuse to take up arms against American citizens. And I guarantee you that whether I'm in the reserves or not, somebody's going to be watching me come time for any of this to happen, and I may be in jail as soon as this starts because I've already emphatically stated I will not take up arms against American citizens. I'm not a cop. I refuse to be a cop because I don't want to get shot by someone downtown my own hometown. I can deal with getting shot by someone on foreign soil. I'm kind of weird like that. I can't be a cop because I don't want to be shot by my own people.
But my issue is just like the difference in technology between what the people have available to them versus what the military has available to them has, that gap has really opened up now.
Well, yeah, and we do it in the name of safety, and every time it comes up, I raise a red flag. I mean, we are down to semi-automatic weapons are the only way we can defend ourselves against the United States government should the need arise to rise up. So I have had this argument given to me by some gun control advocates. Like, it wouldn't matter anyways. So what difference does it make? Well, I'd rather have the chance to fight back than no chance whatsoever. If I don't have a gun and I don't have the ability to arm myself in any way, what chance do I stand anyways? I'm literally done.
Because keep going. Go ahead.
In some cases, it seems like it's more like having the option. Even if you're outnumbered, you at least want to have the option to defend yourself. You shouldn't have to have any government tell you, nope, you're just screwed.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the firearms and stuff and a squad tries to come and detain you or something, you can fight them. Now, it's a little bit different if they decide, okay, you're just too much of a threat.
Drones flying over America?
We're going to send in an FQ-9 Reaper and just take you out. That's a different story. But at the same time, do those things put out that much heat? I know they don't put out a lot. For the most part, it's very hard to detect them.
Drones?
Yeah. But
it depends on the drone. I mean, if we talk about Predator drones, those are designed to not be caught by radar. They're designed to go in, bomb a target, and come back.
But can you see them with thermal? Because I think thermal imaging is available.
Regulated at all? The drones?
Drones, no. Our president has killed this. He's killed American citizens with drones. Yeah. Granted, they were living in Iran, I believe, but we're talking about Anwar al-Awlaki was killed by our president. No judge, no jury, just our president executing them. And just recently, the Department of Justice released a document, a 16-page document that laid out how President Obama's rules for assassinating American citizens. And
it's okay.
Nobody raises a red flag about this. In fact, I just read somewhere else that MSNBC did a poll and 70-something% of Americans don't care.
Really?
70-something. I don't know who they're polling because most people I've talked to are very worried about this. But 70-something people polled by MSNBC don't care about the president having this power.
That's terrifying. And can't somebody veto him? Isn't our government structured in a way where this shouldn't be able to happen?
This shouldn't happen anyways because he's not supposed to have that much power.
I don't even think it went through Congress.
It didn't.
It just happened?
Yeah.
He is the commander-in-chief of our armed forces. But here is him giving himself the power to kill any American citizen he chooses, as long as it fits within his guidelines. And does anybody see the contradiction here that it's all his rules? It's all stuff he set up. It didn't go through any checks and balances. In fact, the Department of Justice, which is supposed to be our third branch, all of our justices, all of our Supreme Courts, our lower courts, all of those have this document that he listed why he can just kill someone and nothing.
And nobody's said anything about impeaching him for this? I mean, we kick someone out for having sexual relations with a lady.
Well,
He hasn't killed anyone.
We didn't kick him out. We impeached him. We had a trial, and he was
pardoned. He was
right.
fine.
He was not pardoned. He was let off.
He was let off, right? But he didn't kill anyone. Whereas Mr. Obama can, he's killing people.
Well,
he's
you want to use your favorite thing to say about this?
I'm not sure exactly. He's like Abraham Lincoln.
Oh God, we could go all day about Abraham Lincoln.
Wait. But here's the thing, when the founders wrote the Constitution, the idea was that Congress would be the main body dealing with, the federal level.
Yes and no. I mean, it exists in the separation of three powers because they're supposed to check on each other.
Yeah, they're supposed to check on each other, but I think they, the president would have an influence, the judicial would have an influence, but I think they thought people would mainly be dealing with what Congress was doing because there's the most limits there. And now all of a sudden, it feels a lot like Congress is starting to become obsolete and all the power is moving towards the presidential.
Right, which means that the system is broken. I mean, if it's not staying in balance of its own accord, something's gone horribly wrong.
The system is broken because there were a few loopholes left, specifically in a state of war, that are being abused, and you're moving power that way.
Yes and no. I mean, they weren't left there. They were actually created. Under Bush, new regulations were proposed that basically gave him the ability to wage war as he saw fit. And they've been expanded under President Obama because they can pretty much, a president, and he talked about this too, he was afraid that when he left office, he would leave a loaded gun for the next person. My question is, why do you have a gun? Why are you having the ability to do things that you were never intended to do under the Constitution? He's worried about the next person. I'm worried about him. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, no, because the problem is, I don't think anywhere in the Constitution does it say that one particular branch can't give itself or grant another branch more power. And that
Well, it doesn't say it, but the implication is that it should never do that. And Senator Rand Paul has been up in arms for years now because the Senate and the House, Congress, has abdicated powers to the executive branch and given them the ability to pretty much do whatever they wanted.
And, okay. Well, I was going to say, right now the problem is the two powers being Republicans and Democrats.
They're the same thing.
They're the same thing, but that's what I mean. They've become, before they used to be at odds with each other. They've become the same thing so much so that, they've gotten to the point of they're doing favors for each other. They're basically the same body now.
Right.
I mean, we'll discuss this a little bit later, the idea of authoritarianism, but both sides are the same. They want to run your life, and they feel that they need to protect you. Right now, one of the things they need to protect you from is apparently terrorism. We are worried about terrorism, and President Obama, when he was Senator Obama, complained about the things that President Bush was doing and told him that he couldn't use his powers and just do what he wanted.
And yet now he's doing the same exact thing.
And the thing is,
specifically on drones.
It's not that the government, cares about your safety. It's that, no, it's easiest to implement control over someone in the guise of, we are protecting you.
Right, but that's only if you instill a sense of fear in people, which makes them think they need to be protected.
Have you looked at our education system lately?
Unfortunately, I have. Shush.
That's an issue for another day.
Yeah, but
we could go on and on with this.
I mean, yeah.
But no, they're instilling fear in people so they can say, oh, hey, you need to be protected from this distant war on terror that's not even going on our own soil. But you need to be protected, and we're going to do it by taking away your guns.
A powerful government fears the intelligence of its people.
Right, which is why we're turning into sheep.
When the people fear the government, you have tyranny. When the government fears the people, you have liberty. Thomas Jefferson. And he wasn't crazy, because many people now do fear the government. this administration, the administration before it, has gone out of its way to exert its power over the country.
Through fear.
The tree of liberty should be fertilized with the blood of tyrants and patriots.
Thomas Jefferson thought every 20 years we should have an armed uprising.
Apparently we're overdue.
Oh,
We're
long
about
overdue.
10 times overdue.
Right.
But you know what? I don't think he was right on that we need an armed uprising.
Well,
What we need is vigilant people.
right, but an uprising, if you go through war, especially on your own soil, it means something totally different. It means something completely. Fuck, I can't speak anymore.
We'll have to edit that out.
Right. But it means something completely else to you than just hearing stories about it. Oh, it's happening over the pond. No, if you go through it, you have the experiences. You've held a gun in your hands, you've shot other people, you've defended your rights with your own person.
Well,
and if you have a revolution every 20 years, nobody will forget that kind of horror.
9/11 proved that. I mean,
But that was over the pond.
9/11 wasn't over
Not
the pond.
sorry.
9/11 was here on, American soil. But
too.
the thing is like, the last time we were attacked on our own ground was Pearl Harbor, last I remember.
Right, but
That
even
we actually had a successful attack on our own soil. Because Bin Laden did attack the trade towers before back in 91, and it kind of failed.
yeah, but that was just one incident in comparison to all the things that have gone on around the world.
Oh, yeah,
elsewhere.
I know.
I mean, it's not to raise anyone's hair over this stuff, but it's one small incident in comparison
Well,
to a lot of
actually,
others.
that's the big issue. The idea that you're going to die in terrorism, and this is a big thing. People actually believe that there is a high chance they'll die in a terrorist attack. If we're not in every
Seriously?
country around the world, people truly believe that we might have more terrorist attacks here at home. But the likelihood of you dying in a terrorist attack is smaller than you getting into a car accident.
Or getting hit by lightning, most
Yeah.
likely.
I mean,
Getting
this
into
is
a car accident
this is
quite
something that we've developed and cultivated a fear within our culture. And if you ever read the book State of Fear by Michael Crichton, he talks about this. Not that terrorism is not something you should worry about. Is
Well-
not something you
well,
should worry
the
about. But
we're not dealing from outside terrorism. We're dealing with terrorism from within our own country.
well, yeah, we've become the terrorist of ourselves. I mean, the TSA is by far one of the worst entities to come out of this.
But it's not just that. I
Up
mean,
close and personal.
9/11 showed how weak the people have become because basically Bin Laden brought the battlefield from there to here by flying a plane into two buildings, or several planes into two buildings. And the thing is, the people
3 or 4
reacted.
buildings.
4 buildings?
3 buildings.
Three buildings?
Attempted a 4th. Plane crashed in Pennsylvania.
Okay, yeah. Okay, but still, the point being is that, he brought the war straight to our front door, and all we did was kind of flail our arms and scream, running in circles in the front yard.
And on top of it, it's still kind of
I don't
going
think
on
we-
12 years later. I mean, people are still like, oh my god, it's too soon to talk about it.
Well, yeah, they refused to talk about it, and they refused to believe that we had a hand in our own being attacked. I mean, we've manipulated the Middle East. We've put dictators in power that have treated their citizens like garbage, and we wonder why they want to rise up against us. I mean, we fueled a war between Afghanistan and Russia, Iraq and Russia. We fueled these wars, and this was during the Cold War. There was fighting going on in the Cold War. What did it do? It made them hate us because we were building up two sides against each other so that they could fight instead of us. I mean, we're playing God in the Middle East. We have been for years.
But the thing is like, to me what it should, because like, okay, the government went to war, which was kind of expected, and then they started twisting everything in the name of safety and,
Well, we
got to
go after Iraq because we need to be safe.
But the thing is like, to me that showed how weak the people are, because with that one act, the people are, oh my god, they brought war to our...
I got caught up in it too. Part of the reason why I joined was because of 9/11. I got caught up in the frenzy. I mean, in 9th grade, I got tired of all the complaining and moaning about Iraq, that we might go into Iraq, that I made a sign that said, don't hold back, bomb Iraq.
But I mean, like, going to Kat's point of, people never see war. well, the American people are censored from war, and now you show that that censorship has worked to a degree that you make them weak. The government has an easy time shocking the people into backing
They've
down.
crippled us.
They've manipulated it too.
Yes.
We believe what they want us to believe about it. And this sounds a lot like a conspiracy theory, but we've kind of turned the facts on their head. We've decided that they hate us because we're free.
But we're not free anymore.
They
not
should
free
love
anymore.
us now because we're not free. I mean, why are we still fighting over there? Oh, that's right, because we're playing God. We've gone over there and decided again, like, I do believe Saddam needed to be taken out of power. That was a mess that we created. But ultimately, we were still over there.
We still are.
They hated us. Well, we pulled out of Iraq now.
We have.
Pretty much.
Well, that's still, like, we're still over there in the sense that we've still
Actually-
screwed up that situation. We were still there. We still engineered those situations. And the effect of that isn't going to end just because we pulled out.
That's true, but he's right. We have mostly pulled out because now we have our noses stuck in Afghanistan.
Well, let's go back to gun control and our playing God in the Middle East and the twisting of facts has a lot to do with it.
Aha. The people in the Middle East have weapons and bombs, and they defended themselves against Americans.
Well, there's a good point. I mean, we kind of, like, you could say what you want, whether we were being tyrannical going over there, instilling democracy, as they say, but they did have the ability to defend themselves. But what happens when we hit that point? If we take away our ability to defend ourselves, it will be a cold day. I mean, and here's another point. You were worried about all the technology that they have above and beyond us. Our government has all this technology, but man, one of the phases of our attack in Iraq, we got our butts handed to us because they were using asymmetrical warfare and we were using symmetrical. We were attacking for a tank-on-tank force, stuff like that. Whereas they were doing guerrilla-style tactics. They were coming at us sideways, blowing up our tanks and things like that because we weren't prepared. We were doing what Britain did during the Revolutionary War.
Which by now I'm pretty sure our military has learned and figured out how to deal with that. But the other thing is, now that I really think about it, is like, we took a lot of casualties when we were in Iraq. And the gun was a very useful thing, but I think the majority of our casualties actually came from IEDs placed in the road, buried underneath.
That asymmetrical warfare. I mean, they basically said, we don't have the ability to fight symmetrically. I can't go person for person against you. So I'm going to go asymmetrically. I'm going to make you get put in a bad position, and then we'll take you out. So in that case, we have a chance, and we'll probably be more prepared than the military will be, because the military will probably be on the defensive because of an uprising within the military. So that will be an interesting day. But if we come back to gun control some more, I mean, some of the arguments given for gun control have to do with violent crimes and how much violent crime we have within the U.S.
Like, Chicago's one. There's Australia isn't the U.S., but Australia has pretty bad crime rate.
Talk about Australia, or not Australia, Chicago.
I mean, should talk about Australia too, and the fact that they don't have guns.
Well, Chicago has the highest gun control. I don't know now; it might be competitive with New York, but it has the highest gun control laws and the highest violent crime rates in the entire U.S.
How does that work?
And I just read a report from Reason today that came from the Washington Post that said that El Paso, Texas, my least favorite place in the world, El Paso, Texas, has the most lax gun control laws in the nation, has the lowest violent crime rate, and what's across the border? The most violent city in the world, Juarez.
Yeah, but in Texas, I mean, if you think someone's if you think someone's carrying a gun, would you really want to randomly start shooting people? Honestly.
Well, you wouldn't try to rob someone. You wouldn't try.
Well, see, that's what it is. Who backs gun control? Criminals do, because if you don't have a gun and I want to rob you,
and you have a gun, I'm screwed.
Well, because see, here's the thing. Well, no.
Criminals aren't going to turn in their guns. They're criminals for a reason.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, okay, so you go and rob someone. There's a difference between robbery and murder, by a good 25 years to life difference. And
well, there's a big difference for the person on the other end of that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you lose your wallet, as opposed to there's two sides of it, and I'm pretty sure the gun control advocates probably try to play this, which is where they get their Wild West scenario from, which is, in order to rob you, they would have to, kind of shoot you on sight so they wouldn't have to take the risk. The thing is, that completely throws out self-preservation, because most people are not going to shoot on sight, given the fact that you might actually carry a weapon yourself and you might be able to return fire.
Well, see, that's an interesting argument. I'll do just a short tangent here. I was discussing with someone recently. They were telling me how Ron Paul was so terrible because he didn't support our allies, and I was like, I don't see where you're going with this. Especially since Israel has the ability to defend itself. Israel has second strike capability. Israel has probably third or fourth most nuclear weapons stockpile in the world.
Israel is a very well-armed little country that
exactly.
is used to fighting.
And we're worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon because they might blow up Israel. And the problem with that is, if they did that, Israel would blow them up. So
entirely.
That's where mutually assured destruction comes in. Like, if you have to throw out that self-preservation aspect. If you watch the movie War Games, the computer ultimately decides it's stupid. Why? Because no matter what happens, you lose. That's why we never launched nukes against Russia, because we would have been destroyed.
Well, that basically then what they're saying is, worrying about them getting a nuke, is basically they're so insane that we can't trust them not to just create a nuclear holocaust between themselves and Israel.
Yeah, but back to gun control off of that useless segue.
All of these.
That nuclear tangent.
That nuclear tangent.
One of many.
There are many.
Well, because if you look at Australia, they they repoed all the guns and then destroyed them, or at least most of them.
Confiscation,
anyway.
Which we've done here in California, off of our original assault weapons ban, which they're talking about another assault weapons ban. A little ironic because the first one never came off the books, so we're banning more weapons now. But they're talking about this new bill that they're going to vote on has confiscation written into it. It's not something they're doing after the fact. The first time around, they made everybody register these assault weapons, and then they wrote another law that said they all needed to be confiscated. So what they said they weren't going to do was use this list of registration to confiscate. They did. They used the list of registration to go in and confiscate all these weapons.
So if you can't trust your government to do what it said it would do, what's the point of following it in the first place?
There's a very good question, and I think you might be leaning more libertarian now. The more laws you enact, the more criminals you create. And I was reading an article from Reason. I think it was by J.D. Tusil. Hope I'm not butchering his name. But he wrote about the fact that he never once thought about illegally purchasing a gun until he went to buy a handgun and couldn't get through all the red tape. So what did he do? He went to the black market and bought an AK-47.
Are you sure you should be saying his name on the...
That's published.
Oh, yeah.
That's published on the Reason Magazine website. That was a little nutty to me. But in New York, with some of the strongest, strictest gun control laws, he easily went out and bought an AK-47.
AKs aren't that expensive either on the black market.
See, that's what's funny about it. And I read another article today, which was, I'm sorry to cut you off again. I read another article today from the same guy about like the more laws that you're creating, the more criminals you're creating. So all these different things, like his family, when it comes to they're trying to reban marijuana in Washington and Colorado. And he talks about his family. He thought he could see them in the background snickering because they're businessmen. His family, back through Prohibition, all these other bans that they've had, like drugs and guns that have been banned, his family has actually made money by selling these things that the government said they couldn't.
So
on the topic of the more laws you pass, the more criminals you create, isn't that kind of against the government's purpose? Because the more criminals create, you're just kind of using it as...
More people in a cell? More people in a cell, more people we have to pay for?
Yeah, but it's also you won't have anyone to protect if you list everyone as a criminal, so it just destroys its own
you will be
purpose.
Protected. You'll be locked in a 4x8 cell somewhere.
So what's the point of that?
Until we run out of space, and then we do like the British and send all our convicts to an island.
Australia.
Yes.
Yeah, but what's the point of that? Okay, so everyone's gonna be safe in a nice padded cell. Then what?
Yeah, I mean...
you won't have money. Nothing will be generated from that.
I think it was Frederick Delano Roosevelt who said people in prison have complete safety. And you can argue whether or not they really do have complete safety.
They're safe from the government, but not safe from each other.
They're pretty much, like he said, people in jail have complete safety, but they have no freedom.
Right.
So basically you choose your position. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, people who trade liberty for safety deserve neither. And I kind of agree with this.
Because, yeah, you are trading liberty for, like, okay, you're free, you're in a capitalist world, now you go to prison, you have no freedom, but in a way it's kind of socialist because everyone else is caring for you.
Yeah, but that sounds like a terrible way to live.
Yeah,
I mean, what's so bad about being free?
It's a terrible way to live, but...
The world... I can't remember who said this, but the world is full of sharp edges, and no amount of padding is going to protect you from it. So when you realize that it's dangerous when you walk out that door, you do your best to mitigate it yourself. Nobody can protect you from every hazard there is.
That's why you should be educated, so you can take care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally.
We should spend more time as a people, not as a government, as a people, educating ourselves to the dangers around us.
I don't think anything will save you from stepping off the curb and getting hit by a fallen toilet seat.
Are you referencing Dead Like Me?
Yes.
The toilet from... I like that.
But, like...
well, no. That's just... You're just plain unlucky, then.
Pretty much, but there's luck, you know.
on the more laws you create, the more criminals you are. This is where it kind of goes with my recently adopted libertarian thought process. And I'm more anarchistic in some ways. I've become more like Penn.
Should I say happy birthday?
I guess. I'm reborn as a libertarian. Penn Jillette talks about arguing, like, once we get to this small government place, he would argue further for anarcho-capitalism. And I kind of agree with him on a lot of stuff he says, because is it laws that keep people in line, or do criminals not obey the laws anyways? So that's the real question.
Well, criminals are criminals because they don't obey the law.
Yeah, exactly. But that means, to some degree, criminals are freer than everyone else.
So if we didn't have laws, and this is where the real question is, if we didn't have laws, would everything just go insane?
No.
Or would the truly moral people stay the way they are, and the crazy people will still be crazy?
That's kind of the long and short of it. I mean, people aren't going to self-destruct just because they don't have anyone telling them what to do, unless you've engineered a society that has robbed people of their free thinking. But in most cases, people are still gonna live day to day. You're not gonna see people picking up guns and going to shoot their neighbors unless they have problems already.
Congratulations, you pretty much are an anarchist. I mean, this idea of anarchy, that it's just insane and, oh my god, everybody's gonna go insane and kill each other because there's no law against me killing you, so I'm gonna kill you now.
It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work because basically the people who live in fear, the only thing they really have to fear is themselves. Because these are the people. I mean, okay, your criminals are kind of predictable.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Well, my point is like, okay, criminals are predictable. They are going to, if someone has been robbing people, they're going to keep robbing people.
Exactly.
If someone's killing people, they're going to keep killing people. But the point being, the person who, you have the group of villagers in their little village, and they're all paranoid of each other. Someone somewhere is going to break, and they're all going to start shooting at each other because they're all terrified the other one's going to shoot at them.
And then someone's going to write a book about it.
Government is built on the idea that you are morally evil. And without someone shaking their finger at you, you will just kill and do whatever you please.
But that's a flawed system then. I mean, if you assume everyone's evil, why don't you just wipe everyone out and be done with it? I mean,
think about this angle. Think about this angle. If everybody's morally evil, and you create an organization of morally evil people, where's the solution?
Yeah, but if everyone's morally evil, who are you to say what's right? I mean, if everyone's morally evil, then they're not evil. We have to redefine it in some better way.
I mean, in all honesty, like, I don't think, even if everyone is morally evil, there's still that self-preservation instinct that's just embedded into being human. And
we're not stupid.
We're not stupid. And the thing is kind of like, I have no problem walking into, say, Vintage Fair Mall and seeing, oh, that guy's carrying an M4, that guy's got an AK, that guy's got an M240 Bravo or something like that, that guy's got a Remington shotgun. Okay, I'm comfortable. What I'm worried about is that one evil guy who, again, this kind of moves towards the war on intelligence of people, but he was smart enough to, say, pack a bomb in the fountain so that he gets all of us. He's not even using a gun.
See, there's an interesting topic. One of the biggest school mass murders in our history was committed by an elderly gentleman who used a bomb. Didn't use a gun. He used a bomb to blow up all these people.
Look at Oklahoma City.
Well, yeah, I mean, the idea that this problem is going to go away with gun control is delusional. And on that note, one of our presidential advisors, I think, maybe it was President Obama, recently said, we have an epidemic of violence in this country. Like violent crime. The problem is that's not accurate. I mean, if you look at the numbers in the UK and Australia, per person, their violent crime rate is by far higher than our violent crime rate here in America.
Well, to interrupt you real quick on that, when Australia started buying back all their weapons and banning them, what we have here, somewhat commonly, that are known as home invasions, skyrocketed in Australia because the criminals knew the people couldn't defend their own homes.
Violent crime rates in Australia during the ban went up 400%. I can't say it any clearer than that. You take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, you make it easier for the criminals.
But even if you manage to somehow remove all guns, people are really good at finding ways to hurt each other. So it'll probably be knives, or if you want to go up a step, bombs. I mean, you're not going to stop it.
I mean, if you really wanted to. The thing isn't just the weapons, it's people are afraid of intelligence also, because, I mean, okay, I can't have any kind of firearm, any kind of gun. Okay, I'm pretty sure I can probably fashion a rocket launcher out of an oxygen tank or something. I can probably make my own napalm bombs. I can probably make a nice firearm out of a nail gun, should I figure out a way to supply power to it.
You spent too much time thinking about this.
Oh, that's
you
not.
can read the Anarchist Cookbook, and that'll give you a lot of information.
And that's not including the entire selection of gas weaponry that you have available to you just by going to, say, Walgreens or Home Depot.
But let's go back to the point I was gonna make.
Don't make any of these at home.
Arm yourselves,
We
people.
are not advocating homemade weapons. There's our
Except for
disclaimer.
him, but
I would never mind.
Byron, please just keep your home activities to yourself.
Giggity.
All right, but
I'm gonna get an FBI, knock on the door in the next 2 weeks or so.
Mr. Burbage, we have a warrant here.
You actually
Who
have a warrant
signed
this
that?
time.
Who signed that warrant? You?
You actually have a warrant this time.
Well, no, they can sign their own warrants now. They don't have to go through a judge. This is how ridiculous it is. An FBI agent can sign their own warrant and come into your house. That's the Patriot Act. Look up Judge Napolitano. One of my heroes talks about this all the time. The Patriot Act allows an FBI agent to write his own warrant, come in, and you can't talk about it.
How does that make them any better than criminals?
That's a very good question. But that's why we have the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is supposed to protect us from that. But nobody does anything about the Patriot Act.
You know what the difference is? The government is behind them. That's the only difference.
So that is technically the only difference, but that still doesn't make it right.
They have the executive, they have the judicial, and they have the
Legislative.
They have the legislative branch behind them.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it right. So
I mean,
even with a government in place, that doesn't mean you're going to have the right things
for
done.
the Patriot Act, it was proposed by the president, signed into law by the Congress, and the one time it was going to review, and Judge Napolitano again does a great job of talking about this. The one time that it came before a court, two little old ladies who were librarians, I forget where, were being librarians. They were doing their job, and these FBI agents came into a public library with a warrant, handwritten by themselves, signed by the FBI agents, and said, we need to see all these books, and we need to see your records of who checked out these books. She looked at it, elderly woman in her 80s or 90s, turned to her elderly assistant in her 70s, I believe, talked about it to her. They were placed under arrest because under the Patriot Act, you can't talk about that. So this went to trial. And these two old ladies were before the judge, and they were presenting this case. And the judge said to him, she said, I am about to declare the Patriot Act unconstitutional. The court case was dropped. And the little old ladies, they're free now.
Poor old ladies.
But the Patriot Act is still on the books because the judicial branch never had the chance to review it.
So it is unconstitutional then.
It's wholly
The
unconstitutional.
judicial branch was going to label it unconstitutional, but because the case was dropped, they couldn't do it.
That's some dirty playing there.
That is exactly what we're looking at in this country today. But after that long tangent, I want to come back to this because our president is trying to say that we have an epidemic of violent crimes in this country. But that's simply not true, and that defeats that goes against every study that's been done. I mean, if you pay attention to the FBI crime facts, I mean, here is an article from the New York Times, May 23rd, that's a good date, 2011, when I got out. Well, no, a year later. New York Times, May 23rd, 2011. Steady decline in major crime baffles experts. This article by Richard A. Opple Jr. The number of violent crimes in the U.S. dropped significantly last year to what appeared to be the lowest rate in nearly 40 years, a development that was considered puzzling partly because it ran counter to the prevailing expectation that crime would increase during a recession. not only this, but if you know, the first assault weapons ban expired in 2004 because it was enacted in 1994. It was a 10-year ban. It expired, and the crime rates have been dropping for 40 years now. These crime rates have been dropping. I mean, how can we have an epidemic of violent crimes if things are getting better? What we have is mass media coverage blowing things out of proportion. So whether or not we have a problem of violent crime in this country is, despite what everyone says, things are getting better. With all the guns we have, with our assault weapons, things are getting better. I mean, how can you continue to say that we have a problem when the facts show we don't have a problem?
That's because most people, well, not most people, the majority, the masses, they don't do research. They stay glued to their television and what the news tells them. And if the news is going into a frothing panic about, oh my god, highest crime rate ever, that's what everyone's going to believe. And that's how this whole fear-based culture is working.
It's not just that, actually.
No?
It's also that you'll get studies that are done,
Mhm.
and they'll show these numbers, but they're also being paid for by the government, and they're skewing the numbers.
Which isn't really surprising.
See, that's the thing. We found that whenever public study is done, and I'm using the air quotation marks, the public study as done by our government is done, it seems that it's always being done to prove a point. It's not being used on a scientific level to find evidence.
And it always conveniently crops up around the time that whatever subject at hand is being discussed.
But what's interesting here is it goes on to say the news was not positive in New York City, however. After leading a long decline in crime rates, the city saw increases in all 4 types of violent lawbreaking: murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, including a nearly 14% rise in murders. But data from the past few months suggests that the city's upward trend may have slowed or stopped. Well, ultimately, you can look at the fact that places like New York have higher violent crime rates anyways. Chicago, New York, Stockton, Oakland.
Well, is the rate based on the amount of people that are there too? Because New York for one has several million people there.
Well,
So does Chicago.
It's talking about an increase in crime based on that area, not as a comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So it went up 14% in the number that happened, but just talking about that area, not anywhere else. Whereas the nation at large over the past 40 years has been decreasing. So, I mean, if there really is an epidemic of violent crime in this country, why do the numbers go counter to that?
Fear-mongering?
Pretty much.
I mean, I think that goes back to, if you get a chance, read the book State of Fear by Michael Crichton. He talks a lot about the fact that up until recently, media didn't use big words to try and grab you, like catastrophic, tragedy, things like that. They didn't really try and use those. And there were times in our history, like the Boston Massacre. 7 people does not constitute a massacre. But for the most part, throughout our history, we haven't seen these words used for everyday crimes.
Well, that's also something that's just a linguistic trend lately where everything is blown out of proportion.
But his whole point in the book is that if we're constantly in a state of fear, we're not paying attention to what our government is doing.
Right. It's
We're
just a
worried
distraction
about-
tactic.
Exactly. So if we're too busy worried about what other people are doing and we're not paying attention to what the government is doing, that's how we get stuff like the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act. I mean, if people continue to be worried about things like violent crime and gun control, even though crime rates have dropped over the last 40 years, things like CISPA and SOPA will finally make it through, and nothing you do nothing you do will be safe.
Well, I think that's because people trust the media. That's it. I mean, they trust the media to the point where they won't even do
Yes
their
and
own...
no. We hate Fox. It's become the proper thing to do to hate Fox.
Well, that tells you something there too, but
I mean, you can't be conservative in today's culture. Like, it's wrong, and a vocal minority stands up and says, you can't be that way, we need to shut you down. But I think that's part of the greater issue, that we don't want to have a conversation. We don't want to question our values. We don't want to question why we believe the way we believe. We just want to believe the way we believe.
right. So what? The majority is content with just doing and thinking what they're told to.
Pretty much.
Basically.
So
I mean, like, we even have a friend who, like, basically whores herself out to the media because she pretty much believes anything you tell her. You know who I'm talking about. And whenever you try to bring information that is contrary to what the mainstream media says and what she claims, now you know who I'm talking about, probably. She'll, like, get crazy about, oh, well, they said this and this, and it's almost always an emotional argument. It's never justified by facts behind it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, people who use logic and facts to back their argument don't seem to get the same weight as those who get emotional about it. Like,
people respond more to emotion. I mean, it's a form of manipulation.
Well, why do you think that the only thing we have on the news lately is the storm in which like 5 people died, and Christopher Dorner? Like,
that's because it generates an emotional response.
Exactly.
That's it. You're not taught to lead with your brain. You're just taught to be led by what pulls at your heartstrings.
Well, you're taught what to think, not how.
I think a lot of Republicans are starting to react emotionally now too. I mean, look at their response to what Ron Paul said. Like, Ron Paul was trying to point out a greater issue with post-traumatic stress disorder. And all they heard was live by the sword, die by the sword, which was intended to be a statement about he tried to help this person and he died because of it. And it's about the fact that PTSD isn't dealt with. Like, we don't have the research that we need to help our own soldiers.
Was that about the military guys that went to the shooting range and then they got shot by the guy they were trying to help?
Yeah. And his whole point is that we haven't spent the time trying to figure out PTSD, its causes, and ways to counteract it. We're more concerned with fighting wars, and this is really what he's talking about. We're more concerned with fighting wars than we are taking care of our own.
Well, they haven't even gone past the war into like finding a solution for people. They're just at the war. The war is the end.
Yeah,
and
when
the
they
beginning.
get sent back. And I mean, I don't want to make it sound like the military isn't trying to do anything, but we spend more time figuring out ways to put people in shitty situations, and there I go, than we do trying to figure out why people end up this way, like why people end up with post-traumatic stress disorder and how we can help them. And my point being that Republicans respond emotionally. When someone says something against the military or perceived against the military, they're up in arms. Oh, you're a terrible person. Why could you say that? How can you go against our troops? Because in that case, they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about the consequences of our actions. They would rather shut somebody down and say, oh, you're anti-military, when that's really not the case.
So they're just deflecting then.
Exactly. And I think that's a greater problem in our country today.
Well, yeah, because now people are using blind faith and patriotism to...
But that gets you nowhere good.
Well, it's the same as like...
You wrap yourself in the flag. I mean, is the flag what we're defending, or is it the Constitution? Are we defending the ideals that we hold to in this country, or are we just saying we're defending this country?
Because to me, like, all the flag is just a symbol. That's it.
It's a representation of something you believe in.
Yes. And
well,
to a degree, even the Constitution.
Well, it depends on how you think about it.
To me, the flag is less important than the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Right.
I mean, that's where it's at. If we are defending that document, and we swear to when we become military, when we become police, when we become when politicians become politicians, they swear to defend this document. Like, it's not about the nation or a symbol of the nation. It's about what we believe in, and I think we've lost sight of that. I think we've lost sight of who we are and the fact that we believe in freedom for everyone, not a select few, everyone.
And see, because like I even see freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is supposed to also incorporate symbolism.
Right.
Like there was a woman off in Florida who took her top off, and they arrested her, but they let her go. They didn't charge her because she did it symbolically, because she thinks that if the guys get to walk around the beach during what's that party time for the college kids? I forget. Spring break. If the guys get to walk around with no shirt on, why can't the women do it?
Well,
too?
they do marches in New York all the time, topless, because they're making a statement.
But my point is, like, if I remember right, they made it illegal to burn the American flag.
No,
Oh,
Supreme Court has upheld that you can burn an American flag.
Okay, because to me, like that, like
that's the video I showed you with Penn and Teller on the West Wing. That's their whole point there. Beyond the Bill of Rights is what we're fighting for. It's that you can burn the flag anywhere.
Yeah. But that's my thing. It's like, you know, I fully support, okay, you can burn the flag. I fully support the KKK marching through the streets.
And our single greatest, like we talked about last time, the single greatest scene was when the neo-Nazis were allowed to march and everybody went out and turned their backs on them because they protested the protest. That was one of our single greatest moments in our First Amendment rights history.
So you basically support the ability to do something, even if you don't think it's right.
I will defend your... I may not agree with you, but I will defend your right to say it with my life.
Basically, it's pretty much that. And it's like, okay, I don't agree with the KKK, but I think they have full right to go and do whatever protest they want, even though, people over the system can't tell, but I'm black, so...
Yeah.
But the thing is, like...
No, he is not a white racist person that wants to shut down black. No, he's black.
But no, the thing is, like, you know, I fully support their right to free speech. I don't support suppressing their right to free speech. If you don't want to hear it, don't pay attention to it.
Exactly. I mean, we've gotten away from this idea that if you don't agree with something,
you should shut it down.
Well, that's what we've moved to. I mean, we've gotten away from the idea that you can say it, but I'm not going to listen to you. Instead now, it's, I don't like what you're saying, I'm going to shut you down.
Isn't that kind of a juvenile way of protecting yourself, though?
Yeah. But I think we've become a kind of nation of children because the government has coddled us for so long. And they've protected us from ourselves.
Which means we're crippled.
Exactly. I mean, instead of taking the time to build people up, we protect them, we shelter them, we keep them from being offended, things like that. Well, here we go to the last point. I mean, this is what we've been talking about the whole time. What is the Second Amendment?
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Key emphasis on the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Which is because it's the right of the people, not the right of the militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And why did they believe this way? Why did our founding fathers write this?
So that way we could defend ourselves.
Because they just fought a war against a government, a militia, an army that was trying to take their rights away. And this is our way of saying that we will always have the right to defend ourselves.
Now, I know by definition standards, there might be different views of it, but to me it's always been you have the army, the military, and then the militia is usually a military group made of the people or a group of people who haven't been formally trained necessarily in military tactics. Some of them might be, but my point being is they made it so that way you're protected against your own militia. to keep your own weapons. So you're not only protected from the army that's invading, you're protected from your own military established body.
And if you read the Federalist Papers and you read the words of our founding fathers, you learn that this is exactly what they intended. Our ability to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government.
It's not necessarily ourselves physically, it's our ideas and everything we stand for.
Because what we're defending is our right to do something. We're defending because they weren't necessarily fighting for themselves. They were fighting for their children, their families, to be able to be who they are. Whether it's religion, whether it's saying what they want to say, whether it's against the government or whatnot. So ultimately, it comes down to not just them, but everybody having the right to have their say. And yes, we can argue that they suppressed slaves and said they couldn't speak. They suppressed women and said they couldn't speak. But I think that's where we've moved from and gone, you know what? That's one of those things that, yes, this is what they said, and that's what it should be.
Yeah, but here's the key thing, though. With most of those, we gave more rights. We didn't take rights.
Well, yeah, that's it. The idea, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are limitations on government. They are not limitations on the people. And that's what we got to get away from, is the idea that it's limiting us. It's limiting government. It's saying this is what government is allowed to do. It's protecting us. Anybody want to say anything else before I close this out?
I had a thought and then I lost it.
I think we covered most of it and a couple of extra tangents.
But I don't know. My key point was just that, we haven't taken right. The major amendments, giving women the right to vote, allowing black people or ethnicities other than white people their freedom.
Yeah.
It's always been giving rights. It's never been taking away, and now we're moving into an era of
well then there's the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, where the federal government is telling you that you will buy something. Yeah, that's the whole health insurance thing. You will buy health insurance.
Well,
what if you can't
can also
afford it?
you can also argue that with the auto insurance thing too. I mean, you have to have car insurance.
Well, you don't have to have a car.
You don't have to have a car, and
that's
you don't
why
have to have
I don't
car
generally
insurance
argue that point. I mean, I think it's dumb that we got to license everything, and everybody wants to protect us that way. But you don't have to have a car, so
you don't have to have a car, and technically you don't have to have a
horse and buggy.
That's true, but
grow out your beard too.
Yeah, be Amish and then get put in jail for 15 years because you suggest that people should cut off the rival Amish guys' beards.
But no, with a car, you don't have to have insurance. You can
shall shave, damn it.
You can have state recognize that you are financially fit enough to cover any damages yourself.
Oh no, if you are. Also, on the gun control thing, if you can't regulate your finances, you're not going to be allowed to have a gun.
What do you mean you can't regulate?
If you're in debt, they're not going to allow you to have a gun.
So if I have a loan, I can't have a gun?
But not exactly.
No,
I mean, if you default or you fall behind at any point, you won't be allowed to own guns.
Isn't that more of a reason to want guns?
Yeah. That's a topic for another day. I mean, we've covered a lot tonight, from Christopher Dorner and the cops that are attacking and guns blazing on innocent civilians to gun control and its insanity and how it pretty much kills more people than it saves. So,
hey, wait, I have a question. Does the right to bear arms mean I can have like an A-10 or a nuclear bomb or something?
Also, why can't the LAPD, aim?
Yeah, why can't the LAPD aim? Well, that's what we'll close it out on. Why can't the LAPD aim?
You suck at accuracy, man.
This is the third perspective, where we wield the first before the worst. I'm your host, Rob. Thank you and good night.
34